Hey Cowboys Nation, welcome back to the channel where we keep it real about everything Dallas Cowboys. The team is constantly working hard, improving every day, and striving for those big wins we all want to see. But today, I've got some juicy news off the field that involves one of the most vocal critics of the Cowboys, Stephen A. Smith. Before we get into it, go ahead and smash that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. And let's talk about how Smith is out here comparing himself to our QB, Dak Prescott, and even demanding $100 million from ESPN. Yeah, you heard that right. All right, so here's the scoop. Stephen A. Smith, who's never been shy about throwing shade at the Cowboys, especially Dak, is now saying he deserves a bigger payday because of his impact in the sports media industry. According to Uproxx, during a recent interview on CNN's Boardroom with Chris Wallace, Smith didn't hold back. He straight up said he wants a $100 million contract from ESPN over the next 5 years. Let that sink in for a second. This man believes he's worth more than $20 million a year. Now, here's where it gets spicy for Cowboys fans. Smith is out here comparing his worth to Dak Prescott's contract, which is around $240 million, with Dak making roughly $60 million annually. And Smith is saying, look at what I bring to ESPN versus what Dak has brought to the Cowboys. He's not wrong about his media success. The guy has been a top voice in sports for over a decade, and whether we like him or not, his ratings are undeniable. But to compare himself to Dak, that's where we might have something to say. Smith made his argument pretty clear. In our respective industries, I win. He's talking about being the number one guy at ESPN while Dak, well, let's be real, he's had his ups and downs. Smith even pointed out that Dak, in 8 seasons, has only led the Cowboys to 2 playoff wins. Ouch. But hold up. Just because Stephen A. has been successful in his lane, does that mean he should be throwing shade at a player like Dak, who's out there facing real physical challenges every Sunday? It's important to remember that Dak's job isn't just about wins and losses. He's also a leader in the locker room, a face of the franchise, and he's dealt with his share of adversity. Remember his brutal injury back in 2020? Smith might be dominating TV ratings, but there's no doubt that leading America's team, dealing with injuries, and the pressure of being the Cowboys QB is a whole different level of intensity. It's not just about the paycheck. But Smith doesn't stop there. He brought up his journey in the industry, and honestly, it's an impressive one. Back in 2009, ESPN fired him. Yep, Stephen A. was let go. But in 2011, they brought him back, and since then, he's played by the rules of the industry and climbed to the top. His current contract, by the way, is already massive. He's making $12 million annually, making him one of the highest-paid talents in sports media. Yet, he feels it's time for an upgrade. Smith pointed out that when ESPN is making money, he's a big part of why. If Disney or ESPN are losing money, it ain't because of me, he said. Now, to be fair, he's got a point. With how much attention his takes get, whether you agree with him or not, he's undoubtedly been a key factor in keeping ESPN at the forefront of sports talk. And with the way the media landscape is shifting, high-profile personalities like Smith are in demand. So, in his mind, he's earned that $100 million, especially if Dak can get $240 million with only 2 playoff wins under his belt. But this whole thing brings up a bigger conversation. How do we measure value? Is it about how much noise you make in the media or how many rings you win on the field? Sure, Smith's been the top dog in his industry for a long time, but Dak has a different set of challenges and expectations. Can we really compare the two? Now, let's shift gears a little bit. Speaking of Dak and the Cowboys, let's talk about some injury news leading into our Week 5 clash against the Steelers on Sunday Night Football. Thursday's injury report is out, and there are some big updates. First up, All-Pro cornerback Trayvon Diggs is dealing with an ankle injury, and he was limited in practice. That's a concern for our secondary. Rookie corner Kalen Carson also showed up on the report with a shoulder injury. Then there's the huge news. Micah Parsons, our defensive monster, is still out with the ankle injury he suffered back in Week 4 against the Giants. Parsons is a game changer, and not having him on the field for a primetime matchup against a tough Steelers squad is going to hurt big time. We do have some good news, though. First-round rookie offensive tackle Tyler Guyton was a full participant in practice despite his shoulder injury, so that's a positive sign for our offensive line. Ezekiel Elliott, though, was limited due to dehydration, and rookie wide receiver Ryan Flournoy and running back Rico Dowdle were also limited. On the Steelers side, they've got some injury issues of their own. Defensive tackle Cameron Hayward didn't practice, and Larry Ogunjobi was limited with a groin injury. They're also dealing with a couple of key absences in their linebacking core, which might give our offense a little more breathing room. With all this in mind, Sunday's matchup is shaping up to be a hard-fought battle. We've got key players sidelined, but it's prime time, and anything can happen under the lights. The Cowboys need to find a way to overcome these injuries and get the job done. First, let's talk about the bad news. Micah Parsons, one of our defensive stars, is dealing with a high ankle sprain he suffered last week. While there's a chance he could come back sooner rather than later, it's still up in the air. And if that wasn't enough, DeMarcus Lawrence, our other key defensive player, has officially been placed on injured reserve. So yeah, we're going to be missing some serious firepower on defense. And it doesn't stop there. Wide receiver Brandon Cooks is also expected to miss at least this game after developing an infection following knee injections. With Parsons, Lawrence, and Cooks out, it's safe to say that the Cowboys are going to be shorthanded heading into this matchup. So what does this mean for the game? How will the team perform with so many key players out? Our friends over at NFL Pro have some predictions. And honestly, it's looking like our offense might have to rely more on the passing game. Let's take a look at some of their projections for Sunday's game. Dak Prescott, 247.3 passing yards, 1.8 TDs, 0.7 INTs, 13.7 rushing yards, 0.1 rushing TDs. In last week's game, Dak threw for 221 yards, 2 TDs, and had -1 rushing yards. The projection isn't far off from his actual performance. Dak's quick passes were key, especially with so little time in the pocket due to injuries on the offensive line. We're going to need more of that fast decision-making against the Steelers. Rico Dowdle, 34.1 rushing yards, 0.2 TDs, 2.1 receptions, 15.3 receiving yards, 0.1 receiving TDs. Last week, Dowdle outperformed his projections, racking up 46 rushing yards, 1 reception for 15 yards, and a receiving TD. With Ezekiel Elliott not looking like his prime self anymore, Dowdle might need to step up even more this week. CeeDee Lamb, 6.9 receptions, 87.8 yards, 0.5 TDs. Lamb also outperformed last week with 7 catches for 98 yards and a touchdown. He's going to be Dak's go-to guy once again, especially with Brandon Cooks out of the lineup. We're expecting Lamb to carry a big load on offense. Jake Ferguson, 3.9 receptions, 40.8 yards, 0.3 TDs. Ferguson surprised everyone with 7 catches for 49 yards last week. As one of Dak's more reliable targets in the middle of the field, expect him to play a bigger role, particularly in short yardage situations. The big question mark is whether the Cowboys can establish a run game. NFL Pro's projections make it clear that our rushing attack isn't expected to do much against the Steelers' defense. In fact, Pittsburgh holds the upper hand in almost every category related to the ground game, both offensively and defensively. And without a strong running attack, it puts even more pressure on Dak to deliver through the air. The Steelers' pass rush is relentless, and they rank near the top of the league in sacks. For Dak, the key will be getting the ball out quickly, something he did brilliantly last week, completing 13 of 14 passes for 143 yards and 2 TDs in under 2.5 seconds. That kind of efficiency is what's going to be needed again this week. Dak is currently leading the NFL in tight window throws, meaning he's fitting the ball into some very tough spots. That's a sign of how little room our receivers are getting and how quickly Dak has to release the ball. On the other side of the ball, Pittsburgh's passing attack is expected to be more consistent, especially without Parsons and Lawrence putting pressure on their quarterback. Mobile QBs have had success against the Cowboys' defense in the past, and Justin Fields is no exception. Last season, Lamar Jackson was projected to have 50 rushing yards against us, and he ended up with 87. Fields, though not on Lamar's level, can still cause problems with his legs. And without our two best pass rushers, containing him becomes even harder. The Steelers are the slight favorites heading into this game, and honestly, it makes sense given all the injuries the Cowboys are dealing with. While they're favored by less than the usual 3 points given to the home team, it's clear the experts are leaning towards Pittsburgh, particularly due to their defense and how banged up we are. But here's the thing. Just because the Steelers look better on paper doesn't mean the Cowboys are out of it. Dak has shown he can handle pressure, and if we can find a way to neutralize their pass rush and control the game with short, quick passes, we have a shot. The running game, though, could be the deciding factor, and right now, it looks like the Steelers have the advantage there. So, Cowboys Nation, here's where I want to hear from you. What do you think about Stephen A. Smith's comments? Does he really deserve $100 million? Is it fair for him to compare himself to Dak Prescott? And more importantly, how do you feel about the upcoming game against the Steelers? Can we pull off the win with all these injuries? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And while you're at it, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more Cowboys news and analysis. Let's keep this conversation going. And as always, go Cowboys.